Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Ukraine had a pretty exciting weekend. Here's the big news. Ukraine will receive F-16 fighter jets from the Western Coalition. This was confirmed by Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor. And this is a big step for the United States to join the major effort to train Ukrainian pilots on F-16s. Here's a tweet from Prime Minister Sunak. We welcome the announcement that the U.S. will approve the training of Ukrainian pilots on F-16s. The U.K. will work together with the USA, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Denmark to get Ukraine the combat air capability it needs. So currently, everyone's at the G7 summit, talking to reporters, answering a lot of questions. And Prime Minister Sunak stated that Ukrainian pilots will arrive in the UK this week to begin their training on F-16s. It also kind of sounds like there's going to be a second training location, possibly either in the United States, the Netherlands, or Denmark. Regardless, the UK doesn't have any F-16s. They don't have any F-16 pilots. So the planes to train on and the instructors are coming from somewhere else. So this is a team effort, part of this coalition. I don't want to leave anyone out. Portugal also announced that they're going to be joining the aircraft coalition. So we've got the UK, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, and Portugal officially in the coalition. Their job is to find instructors and to find planes. Either donate them themselves or purchase them from somewhere around the world. There are over 5,000 F-16s in operation around the world. So the goal is to purchase, my guess is close to 100, and donate them to Ukraine. And ideally, they're all the same modification. They all run the same software so that it's easier for the pilots and maintainers in Ukraine to operate the aircraft. So what's the timeline? And according to a leaked U.S. internal Air Force memo, they stated that basic F-16 training for Ukrainian pilots could take just 4 months. This was an official U.S. Air Force assessment. This was done like 2 months ago, and it leaked online. So not really a big deal that this information got out. 4 months from now, the planes could be purchased, they could be delivered to Ukraine, and the pilots could be ready to go. So currently we're in May, June, July, August, September. So I'm saying it's a guarantee. By October, Ukrainian pilots will be operating combat missions on the F-16. This picture that you see right here are do-it-yourself homemade rigs where Ukrainian pilots have been training on simulators for the F-16s. So they're highly motivated, they know what this means for the defense of their country, and I'm confident they're going to crush their training. So what is Russia's response? Providing Ukraine with F-16 jets, a colossal risk for the West. We have right here Russia's response on Kremlin State TV. This is when they announced it to their people. And just listen to the tone of this broadcast announcing that Ukraine is getting F-16s.
Россия должна исходить из того, что большая группа украинских военных пилотов уже готовится и обучается на F-16. Просто эти вопросы не публично, закрыты. А на территории США и ряд других стран, скорее всего, наверное, на территории США такая подготовка уже ведется. Потому что в момент, когда будет объявлено, что поставки разрешены, должны быть подготовлены, как минимум, наверное, 70, а может быть 100 боевых пилотов ВВС Украины, которые будут способны применять указанный тип оружия, в том числе с новейшими всеми средствами поражения.
This looks and sounds like a funeral. I just love looking at Olga's reaction. In her mind, she's thinking, we're screwed, we're screwed, we're screwed. And of course, it wouldn't be a day of Kremlin state TV without threatening to nuke anyone. Let me share this clip with you.
Бахнем ядерной бомбой.
Бахнем обязательно, Роман. Бахнем обязательно. Я думаю, что все к этому идет. И вот особенно вот эти вот русофобские страны, больше всего возникающие, выпрыгивающие из штанов, они, конечно, обязательно, наверное, получат по заслугам. Ну вот просто все к этому идет. Вот хлебом не корми, дай повоевать против России. Помним, что...
Russia's military performs so poorly. All they can do, all they've been doing the last 15 months is threatening nuclear war. So at this point, we do need to have a conversation about Putin's red lines. Constantly, for the last 15 months, we've been hearing from the Russians, don't supply this, don't give that, don't do that. Otherwise, you're risking nuclear war. Crossing this line will start World War III. So I think it's important to go back in time and actually listen to the Russians. Listen to what they've been saying. So this article is from February 27th of 2022, 3 days into Putin's special limited military operation. Putin puts Russia's nuclear deterrent forces on alert. They basically raised their DEFCON. So 3 days into their secret invasion of Ukraine, they put their nuclear forces on high alert as a deterrent against the West, telling the West, don't help Ukraine, don't interfere in our special limited military operation, otherwise you risk nuclear war. Let's go forward in time. This article is from April 15th, 2 months into the war. Russia warns US against providing weapons to Ukraine. So in the first couple weeks of the war, the West was sending NLAWs, Stingers, Javelin missiles, body armor, small arms munition, anything easy and portable that we could quickly get into the country. Russia's response was, we're going to nuke you. This is what they say on Kremlin state TV. Nobody's allowed to say anything on Kremlin state TV without the permission of the Kremlin. Going forward in time, June 5th, Putin threatens to strike new targets over Western arms for Ukraine. I think it was about this time the M777 howitzers had just arrived, HIMARS had just been announced, on their way. Let's go forward in time to September 15th. Russia warns US not to provide longer-range missiles to Ukraine. So at this point, Ukraine already had HIMARS with Gimler's rockets, 80-kilometer range, and Russia was warning, don't send ATACMS. Don't send longer-range missiles. To be fair, the United States never sent ATACMS, but Ukraine has Storm Shadow missiles and Scalp missiles from France. So Ukraine got longer-range missiles. Let's go forward in time, December 15th. Russia warns of consequences if the US sends Patriot missiles to Ukraine. Within 2 months, the first Patriot missile system was delivered, and now it's operational. Let's go forward in time, February 2nd. This was 3 months ago. Putin warns of Russian response to Western tanks in Ukraine. So don't send Abrams, don't send Leopards, don't send Challengers. So this brings us to today. These are all of Russia's red lines. February of last year, if you help at all, we will nuke you. April, if you send artillery like the M777, we will nuke you. June, if you send HIMARS, we will nuke you. September, if you send long-range missiles, which we've now done, we will nuke you. December, if you send Patriot air defense systems, we will nuke you. February, if you send modern tanks, we will nuke you. And now May, if you send F-16s, we will nuke you. We've run out of red lines. Everything that Ukraine has asked for, they're now getting. Maybe not in the quantity they would like, but definitely in the capability. The final two things, long-range missiles and fighter jets. They're getting Storm Shadow and Scalps, and they're getting F-16s. There aren't any more red lines to go. There's no additional capabilities that Ukraine, that I can think for, is currently asking and not receiving, that Russia is threatening them with. So Russia is not going to use nuclear weapons. And 6 months ago, I made this video explaining why. I'll link it down below. Watch this video if you've not seen it. It's 21 minutes long and titled, Why Russia Will Not Use Nuclear Weapons in Ukraine. So I still argue today, Russia will not use nuclear weapons in this war. And for the short explanation why, Russia at this point in the war only has 3 options. The first option is win, whatever that means. I don't know what Russia's definition of a victory looks like at this point. They're never taking Kyiv. Perhaps their goal is still to take all the territory in the 4 oblasts they formally annexed, but I argue they're never going to get full control of those territories ever. So perhaps their definition of a win is just to hold on to the territory they currently control, force Ukraine to agree to an armistice, and the front lines are frozen forever. That's not going to happen. I still argue Russia might define as a victory pulling all the way back to Crimea and then just holding on to Crimea. Get Ukraine to agree that Crimea belongs to Russia forever. Ukraine's never going to agree to that. They're going to win this war, but that might be what Russia is aiming for at this point. Option 2 is they lose the war. They completely pull out of all the occupied territory of Ukraine. They go back to their own country, but they get to stay in power. This kind of is starting to look like a good option for these 3 men. Gerasimov, Shoigu, and Putin. Combined, they've stolen hundreds of billions of dollars from the Russian people, skimming off the top of the military, taking directly from the Russian treasury. All 3 of these men are deca-billionaires many times over, having successfully leveraged their positions in power to enrich themselves and their families. So in this scenario, Russia would just become a larger version of North Korea. But I imagine that Putin looks at the life that Kim Jong-un has and says, that's not bad, I'll take that if I can stay in power. Option 3 is that everyone dies. If the Russian military chooses to use a nuclear weapon, if Gerasimov, Shoigu, and Putin, these are the only 3 men in Russia who can give the approval to use a nuclear weapon, if they choose to do that, then they're dead men walking. They will not survive this war. They're going to have to pick their favorite nuclear command bunker, go underground, and then never see the light of day again. They know this, because if they try and move around, a Predator drone with a Hellfire missile will be waiting for them. So this is why these 3 idiots will not use a nuclear weapon. You don't get to just kill millions of people and then expect to enjoy your mansions and your mega yachts and have your kids, live in Dubai and prosper. So this is why I think once the Russians believe they can't win, they can't hold on to this territory in Ukraine, they're going to just pull back to their own borders and then try and pull a North Korea. Just try and clamp down and repress their own people as much as possible in order for these 3 men to hold on to their power. Additionally, the concern that this is going to break out into World War III, you have to have military allies for it to be a world war. Nobody's military is coming to Russia's defense. I guarantee you Iran isn't going to protect Russia if they use a nuclear weapon, and even Belarus doesn't want to use their military to help the Russians at the moment. So what about India and China? In the comments section, people love to talk about BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Well, President Zelensky is currently on a world tour and attended an Arab summit in Saudi Arabia, and he was flown on a French military plane over India. Zelensky had permission to travel through Indian airspace. He then flew through Southeast Asia and was allowed permission to fly over mainland China. President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party gave Zelensky permission to fly through their airspace on his way to Hiroshima, Japan, to attend the G7 summit. So my question to you is, the official Russian propaganda, what they say on Kremlin state TV, is that President Zelensky is Hitler 2.0, guilty of a genocide in the Donbass region. Zelensky is a gay, Jewish, demon Nazi. That is the official position of the Russian government. And yet, President Modi of India was willing to sit down with him and talk to him, willing to let President Zelensky fly through his airspace and not immediately ground the plane, arrest him, and turn him over to Russia. India said they will do anything they can to help end this war. That's not true. President Modi is not going to participate in sanctions. But just sitting down with Zelensky, posing for a photo op, this sends a message to the Russians that they're isolated. They can't count on India to be an ally in their aggressive war. Same thing is true for China. President Xi, Sneaky Xi, decided to hold a Central Asian summit while Putin is distracted in Ukraine. So the 5 leaders of the Central Asian region were invited to China for a Central Asian summit. And these countries are supposed to be Russia's sphere of influence. These are former Soviet republics, yet China sees weakness from the Russians. They're moving in, greasing palms, building infrastructure, schmoozing the leaders of these countries. Central Asia is now the domain, the sphere of influence of China. Russia continues to lose. So just to recap the last week, there was a G7 summit in Hiroshima, Japan. Russia is not involved. There was an Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia. Russia was not invited. And there was a Central Asian summit in China. Once again, Russia was not welcome. So things are not going well for Russia. And let's quick talk about the G7. Unified G7 hits Russia with new sanctions. Here's an incredible picture of President Zelensky standing in the middle. This is the leaders of Italy, Germany, USA, Japan, France, Canada, the UK, and then the EU. It's just a moment of solidarity to send the signal that the leading economies of the world, all of them being democracies, are standing united, supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. Okay, let's now talk about Bakhmut. For 8 months on this channel, I've been saying Bakhmut continues to hold. And it looks like the day has finally come where I can no longer say that. Wagner chief claims complete capture of Bakhmut. When we go on deepstatemap.live, indeed it does look like the Russians have captured 100% of the buildings in the remains of the city. But all the territory they've taken in the last 2 or 3 weeks has been well offset by the counterattacks that the Ukrainians have pushed on the south flank and the north flank. So if you think about the last month of fighting, Ukraine has gained more territory than they've lost in the city of Bakhmut. I think Ukraine did this on purpose to basically spoil Russia's victory for taking the city. In addition, there were a lot of Ukrainian defenders that needed to pull out. So by pushing on the south flank especially, they freed up the use of this road, as I'm sure hundreds and thousands of Ukrainian defenders evacuated from the city. And I'm glad they did. Russia's been using a lot of incendiary and chemical weapons on the remaining buildings that Ukrainians were using, so it wasn't a safe place to be in general. And online, I couldn't find any videos really of the evacuation. I'm sure they were instructed, don't film anything because Russians monitor all these channels. But I did find one clip of a Ukrainian defender evacuating from the city. My guess is he's sending a video to his daughter to let her know he's okay.
Ура, блядь. Заебись. Эвакуация. Давайте. Папа обещал ключи хуя-хуя. Блядь, не начался. Фу, бля, весело было.
So under heavy fire, I'm sure they finally pulled out of the city. And at the G7 summit, President Zelensky was asked about the fall of Bakhmut. This is President Zelensky's response.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, President Zelensky, is Bakhmut still in Ukraine's hands? The Russians say they've taken Bakhmut.
I think no. But you have to understand that there is nothing. They destroyed everything. There are no buildings. It's a pity, it's tragedy, but for today, Bakhmut is only in our hearts.
Bakhmut is only in our hearts. And this is what the city looks like. Every person gone or dead, every building destroyed, every tree and animal killed. This is what your city will look like if Russia comes to liberate you. And at what costs? Here is President Biden stating that Russia has lost, killed and wounded, 100,000 soldiers over the last year trying to take this city of Bakhmut.
Bakhmut is a discussion about whether or not it's been lost or whatever. And well, the truth of the matter is the Russians have suffered over 100,000 casualties in Bakhmut. It's hard to make up. It's hard to make up.
Indeed, that is hard to make up. So let's think about this Russian victory in Bakhmut. And I'm going to make the argument that the city of Bakhmut strategically is insignificant. It's just a stepping stone towards the next city to capture the entirety of the Donbass region. This is not a very valuable or important city. Yes, to Ukrainians, every Ukrainian city matters deeply. But my question to you, if you're watching from home and you live in Australia, North America, the EU, had you ever heard of the city of Bakhmut prior to a year ago? This is not a well-known or famous city. So the comparison I want to draw for you is the city of Bismarck, North Dakota. If you're one of my European viewers, have you ever heard of the city of Bismarck, North Dakota? Because the population of Bismarck is the same as Bakhmut. So in Bismarck, North Dakota, they have a population of 74,000. Bakhmut is 73. So let's pretend in an alternate timeline that the Russians invaded the United States and they spent an entire year and suffered 100,000 casualties capturing the city of Bismarck, North Dakota, on their way to conquering the United States. Would anyone be impressed by this? I'm not. And let's use Bakhmut as a yardstick. Let's use this as a tool of measurement to determine how long this war is going to take for the Russians, if you're a Russian supporter. So for a city of 73,000 people, it took 1 year and 100,000 casualties to capture this city. And when we think about Russia's stated objective, they want to get to this dotted line here. This is the entirety of the Donetsk Oblast, including the cities of Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Liman. This dotted line here is the outline for the Oblast of Zaporizhia. Russia annexed the capital city without controlling it. And then presumably they want to get back the north bank of the Dnieper River and retake, the capital city of Kherson. So we're going to do some math here. The city of Sloviansk is 111,000 people pre-war. So this is 1.5 times the size of Bakhmut, meaning it's going to take 1.5 years and 150,000 casualties at the rate Russia is going to take this city. Kramatorsk is twice the size of Bakhmut, so that means it would take the Russians 2 years and 200,000 casualties to take this city. And then we have the city of Zaporizhia, with a population 10 times the size of Bakhmut, meaning it would take the Russians, at the rate they're going, 10 years and 1 million casualties to take the city of Zaporizhia. It's just never going to happen. And Russia is going to have to do all this without the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is the only one capable of offensive operations. But the Wagner Group wants out. In my opinion, Prigozhin already believes that Russia is going to lose this war. He wanted to take the entirety of the city of Bakhmut. He stayed in the area until the job was done. But he's already filmed a video saying that the regular Russian military has to come into Bakhmut in order to replace them, because Prigozhin and the Wagner Group are getting out of there. They want to go back to Africa. So what I think is happening with Prigozhin's PR campaign the last couple weeks, last couple months, is he's trying to position himself as an outsider that can fly back to Russia from Africa in the event the Putin regime collapses. He wants to be a savior figure and a populist when the Russian government collapses. He thinks that's his best ticket to be the man in charge, be the man to lead Russia once Putin is overthrown. So the Wagner Group is pretty much done. I'm kind of glad. I'm kind of sick of listening to Prigozhin talk. So when is this Ukrainian counteroffensive going to happen? And I think it's been delayed. Some people are saying it might be delayed until this fall, until Ukraine has F-16s. I don't believe that's going to happen. But I think the introduction of these long-range missiles is a game changer. So the United Kingdom confirms combat use of Storm Shadow missiles. There's no reason Ukraine should go on the offensive as long as there are still targets to hit in the occupied territories. If Ukraine has the capability with these Storm Shadow missiles to go after ammunition depots, fuel depots, troop concentrations, and command posts, they need to hit every one before they start pushing. This will save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. So every night, they're going to work with these Storm Shadow missiles. 2 nights ago, they hit a building near the airport in Mariupol. Mariupol, for the last year, has been just outside of HIMARS range. The Russians felt they were safe in this city, so this has been their launching pad for ammunition movement and troop movement into the occupied Zaporizhia region. So this is the building next to the airport that got destroyed. It was either an ammunition warehouse or some kind of command post. So that was 2 nights ago. Last night, the Ukrainians struck something in Berdansk. Berdansk, you can see, is right here, also just outside of Gimler's range with the HIMARS, so they've got to hit it with the Storm Shadow. Ukraine is going to hit everything they think is of value as long as they have these missiles before they start pushing on the front lines. It just makes sense. Final couple feel-good clips for you. The first one is Alexander, a Ukrainian defender, sharing some of his artwork used with spent shell casings.
НАТО підходить до кінця.
That's pretty impressive. Final clip I have for you is a Ukrainian defender helping a cat stuck in a tree get down.
Спасение родового рая.
Cats being silly. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, I love hearing from you guys. Let me know down below. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.